Hey, family, we are so excited to bring the second season of Theology in 30 to the Hope TV. Just a little history. We know that Theology in 30 was birthed in 2018, and I hosted a few episodes on Instagram and Facebook. So I have to thank my pastor and our executive director, Dr. E. Dewey Smith Jr., for this opportunity to bring Theology in 30 back for a second season. Thank you, Pastor. Now, for those who are new to us, the purpose of Theology in 30 is to engage in theological discourse with my colleagues, my friends, mentors, family, and people who are just curious about theology. So you don't have to be a theologian or a preacher or even a musician to watch Theology in 30. You can just be curious right now, full stop. And thank all of our supporters and our viewing audience. You guys have been rocking with us since the first season, and we don't take it lightly. We just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. In addition, we want you to talk to us in the comments. Let us know where you're viewing from so that we can shout you out. And even if you have questions during this episode, you can post them in the comments and we will answer them live. Yes, we want to engage with you. So, viewing audience, y'all know me. I need you to do two things. We want you to take this particular episode platforms and also follow us. We want to connect with you. We want you to be a part of our Hope TV family. So follow us on Instagram at the Hope TV. And again, we just thank you so much for your support. Y'all, I am so excited about this episode of Theology in 30 because we have some of Black Scholarship's royalty with us during this episode. When I was preparing for my work, some of you know that I'm working on a PhD in folk preaching and sacred rhetoric. And when I started studying for my work in the rhetoric of folk preaching, I encountered the field of ethnomusicology. Y'all know I'm interested in hooping. So I encountered the field of ethnomusicology, and there were two names that I saw in every resource, in every, and then also Dr. Alisha Lola Jones. I saw her name so much and I said, you know what? I got to find out who Dr. Jones is. And so she is an associate professor in the music department of the University of Cambridge. She's a board member of the Society for Ethnomusicology. She's a member of the Strategic Planning Force for the American Musicological Society, and she's the co-chair of the Music and Religion section of AAR, the American Academy of Religion that I'm a part of. Additionally, and I love this language in her bio, additionally, as a performer scholar. She consults museums, conservatories, seminaries, and arts organizations on curriculum, live and virtual event programming, and content development. Dr. Jones' book, Flaming. Y'all, we're going to talk about it. This book, it really explores the peculiar theopolitics of fire and desire in Black male gospel performance, and it breaks so much ground by analyzing the role of gospel music making in constructive renegotiating gender identity among Black men. I know y'all excited. I need you to share this video on all of your social media platforms because you don't want to miss what Dr. Jones has to say. A little known fact is that Dr. Alisha Lola Jones and her sister, Reverend Angela Marie Jones, are co-owners of Paradise Media Group, a Black women-owned radio company based in Oxford and Henderson, North Carolina. She is married to the Reverend Calvin Taylor Skinner, her partner in work. Theology in 30 audience, I need you to put some love in the comments for our guest today, Dr. Alisha Lola Jones. Say hello to everyone, Dr. Jones.
Hello, Pastor Carner, and to everyone who views Theology in 30. Thank you so much for including me in the conversation. I always love a good chat, and I love to be able to connect with other sistren in the journey. It's a long journey, but I'm so grateful for the connection.
So we're going to jump right in because I know your time is valuable. If I'm not mistaken, you are joining us from the UK?
Yes, we recently took a leap of faith, really heeding the call of what we believe God has shown us to take this thing global. We know that our work is global, and I think taking this leap of faith has really helped people to see the importance of our music, our culture, in a different light. So we are grateful. Yes, Cambridge, England.
So right there, I'm a church baby. I don't know if you're a church baby, but I grew up in the rural, kind of like backwoods area of Georgia. And I
Mm,
remember hearing songs like Be There Directly Sitting Down.
mm, mhm, mhm,
And these really old, there's a dark cloud rise and let's go home, these old songs. And so I have just an adoration for our
mhm.
music and our culture from way back. So I want to ask you, what do you love most about gospel music and Black
Oh,
church? Yeah.
exactly how we are transported to those moments where we saw people who were tested and tried, and then they had a praise, a musical
Come
praise in
on.
response to that test, or where we met God, where we got a realization that there was something bigger and greater, that there was a love, a joy, a peace bigger and greater than who we are. Fortunate throughout the world as we carried the good news. And so music in everyday life for us as people of African ancestry is important. And then to understand music as a means through which we experience the divine is the added
Mm,
benefit of what we are able to amplify as music researchers who happen to be believers. Yeah, I
yes.
love church culture. It's quite entertaining as well, if we're really
Uh,
real.
yeah, yeah. There was never a dull moment from the sister who knocked her hat off to the
Yes.
deacon who tuned up in the prayer. There was so much that we could marvel at and just be mesmerized by. So I want to go here with you. When we talk about the emotive power of
Hmm.
our music and our church experience, I'm studying the emotive power of folk rhetoric, folk preaching
Hmm.
rhetoric. So
Hmm.
I want to ask you, what is it? What
Yeah,
makes our music so effective and emotive? And better yet, let me refine the question and
right.
say, what is your theology of performance?
Yeah, there's so much that I could say theologically, metaphysically, science of our worship that manifests through our emotional response. I think it's a symptom and a symbol of something deeper that is being accomplished. In particular, the traits of what we do within our culture match up with a lot of the principles that people call the law of attraction or manifestation, where through these sorts of cultural practices like exuberance and outward
Yeah.
displays of praise, these aspects of what we do actually move the imperceptible to the perceptible. And so that emotion is actually a required component to get the job done, to actually see God's kingdom come in the earth. I love to walk music ministers through those qualities and how to not just stir folks in their passions, but stir
Yes.
folks in their manifestation.
I love it. So I need you to share this video on all of your social media platforms and put some love in the comments to let Dr. Jones know that you are enjoying this conversation.
When No One Is Watching by Alisha Cole. The main character is moving back home. She's going back, and she's really just noticing how the neighborhood is changing. New neighbors are moving in, old neighbors that have historically been there are moving out. And so the book takes you on this journey of the overall process of gentrification.
Some history behind that is that this has actually been going on for years, where they actually will zone people out and they will put people in a particular area and they will pay them to actually stay in this area. Like, I want you to stay in this area. You can't move here in the suburbs where I live at, but I'm going to pay you to stay over here. And once you move, the payment actually stops.
Well, for me, when I hear gentrification, I automatically think of greed, because that's really what it boils down to.
Today we do some grits and salmon croquette. That's that struggle meal right there.
shift a little bit. You recently published an incredible resource entitled Flaming, the Peculiar Theopolitics of Black male gospel performance. And so may not be familiar. How would you define theopolitics? And let me ask the second part of this whole question.
Yeah.
And why was it so important for you to share this meaningful work with the world?
Yeah, so flaming, and you rightly pronounced the question mark after flaming. It's my way of signaling the questions that are often generated when observing Black men, often in Pentecostal or charismatic praise and worship situations, respond to a move of the Spirit and how it's scrutinized by our community. There are politics that are attached to our theology, how people move about, whether or not it's appropriate for men to observe other men as God moves or the Holy Spirit moves about them. These are unsaid or unspoken aspects of how we understand what is appropriate or competent in worship leadership, but they are at work nevertheless. And so through the book, I follow the trope of the flamboyant choir director, that person who is demonstrative, who is animated, who causes us to touch and encounter God, but whose ability to do so, and their ability to do so also makes us think about they are connected to and what their identity is beyond the worship leader in vocal leadership in the church. And to answer your second question, I suppose the impetus is manifold, but I always go to my relationship with the gatekeepers in my community have opened up a way for me. However, in this particular text, I thought it was important to point towards some folks whose communities, whose identities were eventually ousted from our church fellowship, particularly those who were thought to be or confirmed to be of queer sexuality, or those who express themselves in a feminine masculinity. Particularly Eric Terrain, a man for whom I auditioned as a preteen and whose mentorship and platform really opened up the doors of the world for me. Me and headphones, we don't get along.
Okay.
Who opened up the doors of the world for me, and many others who we can find on CNN or in opera houses like Metropolitan Opera, or at the second oldest English speaking university in the world, Cambridge, like myself. He helped us to see ourselves as children of the gospel. That was the name of the choir. And we have been his progeny since his death in the early 2000s as a result of HIV/AIDS. And that short obituary that I read in our city newspaper really didn't do him justice, and it's stuck with me, along with the narratives of other men whose lives and stories were narrowed because of dominant cultural understandings of their view of Christ, or misunderstandings of their value in the body of Christ. And I take that up in this book, hopefully in a very ethical and pastoral way.
I think you do. I have read your work. I've read Flaming, and I do believe you address a lot of the issues that we don't talk about in some ways that honor the dignity of the stories that you share, the dignity of the persons and the stories you share. But then also it's explored in a very academic way that we can all learn from, and it becomes something that we can teach and share with future generations. So I think you accomplished that goal, right?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So I want to ask you this. You've established, you're welcome. You've established theopolitics is real. We all encounter it in different ways. So I want to talk about healing. What are some ways that we can be better informed as the church regarding politics? What is some advice that you have for us? I want to talk to our audience members who are experiencing this kind of theopolitics. What advice do you have for us?
Yeah, so the beauty of this research is that it's specific to the field of ethnomusicology, which centers storytelling and really allowing people to tell us about the choices that they're making, the quality of their collaborators, their journeys. And since it is an ethnomusicological work, I can include theological perspectives, but it's not at the center of my objectives. I want to make
Yeah.
sure that people's stories are heard so we can get a sense of their why, what brought them to the communities that they serve. And I mention that because I think if we are to look toward healing and to center a core value of my ethic, which is to be known by our love, then it's incumbent upon us to consider people's stories, to be a student of people's stories,
Love
until
it.
we are so acquainted with their perspective that we can not only be persuasive in service of the gospel, but be persuasive, understanding what they bring to the conversation and do so in a way that is in solidarity, walking alongside them, understanding that we are kin, we are all God's children.
Mm.
As opposed to a distraction due to our own biases that have not been addressed. And I want to do the work of addressing our biases that become a whole distraction as men and women of God who are supposed to be the hands and the feet. How are we disjointed? How are we dismembering the greater good of the body of Christ because we haven't found ways to be known by our love in every avenue.
I love it. You actually could have kept going, but I know I only have you for a certain amount of time because I'm sitting here. I'm like, I want to get my notepad out, but I want to zone in on something you said. Being a student of others' stories
Mm-hmm,
until we are known by our love.
mm-hmm,
Now, I don't know if you package, publish, trademark, but that is so powerful. I
mm-hmm,
think
mm-hmm.
for me, in studying folk preaching post pandemic, there are different resources and just primary sources that I go back and revisit and see them with new eyes post pandemic.
Yeah,
And so I
yeah.
want to ask you, or even in the pandemic for many of us, I want to ask you, looking back into your work, are there any theologies that have emerged that are helpful for the church once all of this is over? So when
Yeah.
you look at your work, what is helpful for the church that will emerge after the pandemic?
Stories. I think music ministers, I think preachers should be having conversations with congregants to at least have a sense of each person's, ideally, each counter narrative. Where did they meet God? In what region of the world did they meet God? You gave us some congregational music at the onset of our conversation today that would be helpful for a music minister to know and have a familiarity with the textures. And if that genre is familiar to your pastor, that might actually resonate with them in important junctures within the worship to bring you along on the journey in an idiom and in a style you recognize.
Yeah,
Story
yeah,
helps us to bring people to the nostalgia, which is one of the, I would say, a primary tool for a worship leader, tapping into the valuable memories that are embedded on our bodies, embedded in our spirits, and that immediately take us there as we encounter new material. So I think using the stories to study the congregation, to get the local theology together, but also to get together understanding what sorts of sounds, textures, colors, approaches resonate with the people where they are. I did, well, I often do workshops with music ministries, just going over the genres of Black sacred
Yes,
music.
yes,
Gospel
yes,
music Gospel music has been used as a catch-all phrase through the music industry to talk about Black sacred music, but we have the lining out of hymns, we have quartet music, we have Negro spirituals, we have prayer bands, praise bands, we have brass bands. There are various anthems, hymns. We have various genres that cannot be exhausted in a typical worship service, but if we have them in rotation, we can actually have another tool in our arsenal for revival. And so, in this pandemic moment, and in this shifting and transition that we're seeing, we're being called upon to take the sanctuary into our homes. And the tools that people are drawing upon are what are sort of catalyzed by the worship that they might get through streaming or that they might get if they do hybrid or in-person worship, but then also dusting off those hymn books, those song books, those cassettes or
yes,
cassettes, as my students might say. They don't know about cassettes, but these
yes.
recordings that got us over, that have these deep memories. All of that is being weaved together as we are revising our worship culture.
When will someone know that they need a coach?
If you're looking at your life and you're taking an evaluation of yourself and you're not happy with where you are and you can't seem to come up with what you need to do to become happy, then coach may be that individual that you need. Now, if you're just having a rut, just, a week at a time, and you can kind of talk yourself out of it or you get over that, you may not necessarily need a life coach. But when you are really stuck and you've tried this and you tried that and it's not working for you and you just feel like you need more, then I definitely believe that a life coach would.
You budget, you pay bills.
Yet somehow women like you, like me,
Are 80% more likely than men to live in poverty in retirement.
So here's what we're gonna do now. We're by setting a goal to save 2% more of our income for our retirement.
Why 2?
1% honors you.
And 1% honors all womankind.
So come on, learn more about the 2% challenge at wesaysaveit.org.
Starting out and you do not have the funding necessarily to put subject matter experts in place, then that's when you have to start networking to meet the type of entrepreneurial individuals that would be able to support your business and start thinking about how you can offer whatever it is that you offer to them.
Build that team. Those are your players. They're on your team, and even though we're all in different places right now, that's what we need to keep our business successful.
So you said something that triggered a memory for me of a conversation I had with one of my nephews, who said that hymns are Mary, Mary. I just want to let that sink in. The oldest memory of gospel music he has was the first time he heard Shackles. Okay, so let's sit in that moment. So what does that mean for the life of hymnody in the Black church going forward? You have, nobody knows more about this stuff than you. So predictions. Do you think hymns will be revitalized? Do you think we're losing the hymns? Come on, weigh in on these hymns, Dr. Jones.
Yeah, I think well, what we're observing and what your did you say nephew or
Yeah,
cousin?
my nephew.
What your nephew actually quite common, largely because folks are learning their gospel music through the radio, and because of the various trends in Black radio, a lot of the music that folks are getting does not go beyond the year 2000 or 20 years out. And we're seeing this sort of crisis in literacy repertoire in venues like Sunday Best, where a lot of the competitors enter the competition, and out of the 100 songs that they have on the audition list, maybe 10 of them are known, including His Eyes on the Sparrow. This is why season after season, we would keep hearing people sing His Eyes on the Sparrow, because they didn't know the other hymns. They were learning orally on through the radio. And so as folks who are patrons, listening to radio and streaming service, we have to be actively engaging these platforms, requesting these songs, patronizing the old school Black radio formats to ensure that our culture is preserved and transmitted. Hymnody is actually resurging. Folks are participating in entities like the Hymn Society. There is an emergence of various Black sacred music initiatives where folks are getting out and engaging folks like myself who are practitioners to help people understand the existing repertoire that deserves our interpretation of it. And these sorts of involvements have really bolstered the conversation surrounding decolonizing our worship, where we go back to the musics that our grandparents, our aunties and uncles used, and that were the means to which they got over. So yeah, a very common active engagement with our cultural workers, people who research this and who have not lost the faith, is a very important remedy to that situation.
So, you just said something that almost made me knock my computer off the table. When you say decolonizing our worship and decolonizing our music, you just don't know how many people in our audience you set free and how you blessed me personally. When I started my journey studying folk preaching, I really felt a little self-conscious about hooping, because a lot of young people would say, I don't know what she's doing, because I'm a hooper. They would say, is she singing or is she preaching? They couldn't understand it. And through my research, I realized hooping for me is an homage to our ancestors. It's a part of me honoring and continuing the legacy of a tradition of hooping before my parents were born. And so I like what you're saying in keeping some of these traditions alive in our expression, our music and our preaching. We are showing the next generation who they are, and teaching them our history. Oh goodness, you just blessed us with that alone. You blessed our audience and you blessed me. So this is the part of Theology in 30 I like the least. It's time for us to close. So
no.
You are more than capable. You've proven through this conversation and through your scholarship, you are more than capable of closing us out today. And so I want to give you our last remarks. Is there anything you're working on that you want us to be aware of? Is there a word of encouragement that you want to leave with our viewing audience? And then I will give our official sign off. It's your stage, your floor.
Well, first of all, again, thank you so much to the senior pastor, Dr. E. Dewey Smith, and to you, Pastor Carner, for including me in this conversation and having me on this platform. I just want your viewers and your congregants to know that it's important to include your historians and cultural workers in your worship design in order to make sure that our culture is preserved and transmitted with dignity, and that we can remember who we are. I get the great pleasure of working with seminarians and conservatory students, as well as music historians, giving them a sense of how our culture doesn't need to be elevated. It's never needed to be elevated. I'm just allowing you all to get a sense of the richness that we carry with us. And this is a part of what sustains people like me and my community. On the horizon really is focusing on the global impact of Black music, Black sacred music and Black non-religious music. So I like to pivot and do projects on listening to Black women, in everyday life and performance. I have a book that I'm wrapping up called Sounding Our Signatures Toward a Womanist Ethnomusicology. And I have another project that looks at music and food, so gastromusicology. It's entitled Ultrasonic Tastemakers, and it is toward a critical gastromusicology, looking at consumption practices on the global marketplace. I'll tell your viewers, along with Black musics in general, are the chief exports from the United States. Culture is the chief export. And so investing in it, making sure that we learn about our Black sacred music needs to be done, because folks abroad are really throwing money privately and corporately behind research. And I just hope we are a part of it as insiders as well. So thank you for letting me spread that good news, that we are valuable in what we have to offer.
You have been amazing in this space, as I knew you would be. I've heard you at AAR. So I knew when you accepted this invitation that our time together would be fruitful. So I just want to thank you again for accepting my invitation, and I wish you well.
You too. You too.
You're very far away, so I pray God's continued blessings on your work abroad. This is Theology in 30 on the Hope TV, and I'm a part of the House of Hope, where we believe that life with God is better in every way, every day. Thank you so much for watching, family, and we will see you next week.